My parents had moved to New York when I was about 3 years old. As an only child, I was left to my own devices a lot of the time. I had never met my grandparents, aunts, or uncles. When I was little, I had a lot of questions, but as I got older, I no longer pressed for an answer. So, when I met my wife, Laura, we couldn't wait to start a family. As I turned onto a narrow footpath, I stepped aside to let a couple pass. My gaze drifted to the row of trees lining the cemetery, and I felt it, lurking in the shadows, watching. By now, I had grown used to its presence. A crisp breeze stirred the fallen leaves as I stood over the grave, laying a bouquet of white roses on the cold stone. The inscription read, "Our little rose, forever in bloom, too beautiful for this world, held for a moment, loved for a lifetime. Sleep peacefully, our precious angel. Though her time was brief, her love is endless. In our arms for a moment, in our hearts forever." It was after the funeral of our 2-month-old baby, Rose, that everything began to unravel. 4 years later, I lost my wife. Now, beside Rose's grave lay Laura's. A bouquet of white roses and lilies rested on the marble, their petals trembling in the cold breeze. Even now, the events that led to losing my wife feel surreal, like a waking nightmare I can't shake, no matter how much time passes. Something flickered at the edge of my vision, a shadow, presence. It knows. It can feel my grief, my torment, and it's hungry. But it doesn't strike. Not yet. It lingers just beyond the veil, watching, waiting, savoring every moment. Like a cat playing with its prey. Nothing was ever the same after that trip to Cairo. That was where it all began. After losing Rose, Laura wasn't the same again. She barely spoke. She withdrew into herself. Some days, she didn't even get out of bed. I soldiered on, kept working, kept trying to hold everything together for the sake of our 2 kids, Jake, 12, and Emma, 7. Money was tight, and there never seemed to be enough hours in the day to get everything done. The kids pitched in after school, instead of hanging out with their friends. The guilt I carried over what they were going through was overwhelming. I hadn't taken them on a real vacation in years. The last time Jake and I went camping, he was just 5 years old. Emma hadn't even been born yet. A year passed, then another. Laura still wasn't okay. People told me to give her space, to be patient, but I worried that one day I'd come home and she would be lost. Then, a couple of years later, something unexpected happened. A solicitor showed up at my door one evening, his expression unreadable beneath thick-rimmed glasses. He looked to be in his late 50s, dressed in a crisp black suit, the kind of man who wasted no time on pleasantries. Pushing his glasses up the bridge of his nose, he studied me for a moment before asking, "Are you Joe's nephew?" I hesitated. Joe. The name meant nothing to me, but apparently I had an uncle, Uncle Joe, and he had just passed away after a long battle with cancer. He had no children, no close family left, and so everything he had, he left to me. The solicitor explained that a few years ago, Uncle Joe had finally managed to track down my father. But by then, it was too late. Both my parents were already gone. Dad had succumbed to prostate cancer, and Mom had passed suddenly from a stroke. My wife and I stared at each other, bemused, after the solicitor left. We had signed the papers and received the check. Within a few hours, all our money problems were gone, evaporated into thin air. I wanted to treat my family, especially after the tough couple of years we had been through. My son, at that time, had become obsessed with Indiana Jones, digging up the backyard, convinced he'd find buried treasures. So, I suggested Egypt, Cairo, a 5-day trip. The kids were ecstatic. Their first time on a plane, their first real adventure. Laura, She smiled. She hugged them, but I knew she would have rather stayed home, curled up on the couch, hiding from the world. That was exactly why we needed to go. I told myself this trip would help, that a change of scenery, an adventure, it was just what we needed. During the flight, Jake was glued to the window, watching the clouds the entire time, while Emma got to meet the lady pilot. Now, she wants to be a pilot when she grows up. After a grueling 10-hour flight from New York, we finally landed in Cairo late in the evening. Even after sunset, the heat still clung to the air, thick and suffocating. The city was alive, horns blaring, street vendors shouting, and the scent of spices and exhaust mingling in the night air. I struggled up the cobbled path, hauling the 2 heaviest suitcases toward the hotel lobby. My shirt clung to my back, drenched in sweat, while beads of perspiration streamed down my face as if I'd just stepped out of a pool. The kids carrying their backpacks darted ahead, squealing with excitement as they raced toward the reception desk. Laura hurried after them, half running, half stumbling as her sandals slipped in every direction with each step, her feet damp with perspiration from the heat. She shot me a fiery glare. No words were necessary. This wasn't going to be easy. Accepting the less-than-ideal start to our trip, I gladly handed over our luggage to the porter as we checked in. I told myself things would get better in the morning. I didn't know then, standing in that grand hotel lobby, that our nightmare was only just beginning. Our hotel, a 5-star place near the pyramids, felt like an oasis after the chaos outside. Laura had booked a family room with 2 double beds overlooking the bustling marketplace, the cheapest option. As soon as we stepped inside, the cool air from the AC washed over us, a welcome relief from the suffocating heat outside. The kids wasted no time. As I finished unpacking, I turned to find Jake and Emma already changed into their swimwear, goggles perched on their heads, standing in the middle of the room with pleading puppy eyes. They didn't have to beg twice. Down by the pool, the water shimmered under golden lights. A few other families were there, cooling off after a long day of sightseeing. They regaled us with stories of their adventures, sharing tips on must-see spots and hidden gems. Laura's mood had lifted, partly from her 4th cocktail, partly because the excitement in the air was contagious. She even laughed, a sound I hadn't heard in so long that it caught me off guard. For the first time in years, things felt normal again. We went to bed that night, looking forward to the adventure ahead. Morning came quickly. We had signed up for a private tour of the Great Pyramid and the smaller Queen's Pyramids. Our guide, Amir, was an older man, quiet, his leathery skin creased by years under the relentless Cairo sun. There was something about the way he spoke, low, deliberate, that made you lean in. On the drive there, his gravelly voice painted a vivid picture of Egyptian kings and queens, their power, their rituals, their beliefs. As he described the burial ceremonies in rich detail, I swear I could almost smell the cedar and myrrh. The kids gasped when he explained the embalming process, how bodies were dried, wrapped, sealed away for eternity. But we all hung on to his every word. At the pyramids, time seemed to fold in on itself. Massive stone structures towered over us, their sheer size and presence humbling. We climbed, we explored, we listened. It was, in every sense, incredible. By midday, we were preparing to head back when Jake spotted a smaller pyramid in the distance. His face lit up. "Dad, look. Can we go?" Amir stiffened. "That one," he hesitated, his usual confidence faltering. "We should return. The sun is high now. The heat is dangerous." But Jake had already mounted his camel, urging it forward. Amir sighed, defeated. "Just a quick look," he warned. I was happy to see my kids having a great time that I didn't have the heart to tell them off. They were usually responsible and well-behaved. For once, I decided to let them be kids. The entrance was partially buried beneath layers of sand, but that didn't slow Jake down. He was the first to slip inside, ducking beneath the low opening. The sunlight barely reached past the threshold, casting a dim glow on the narrow passage beyond. Dust swirled in the stale air, disturbed for the first time in who knew how long. Amir hesitated. "I've only been in this one once," he admitted, his voice quieter than before. It was not a good experience. He didn't elaborate. Instead, he cleared his throat and straightened. "Stay behind me. Do not wander. And do not, under any circumstances, touch anything." The moment we stepped inside, the air changed. Our footsteps echoed as we ventured deeper into the pyramid, the air growing heavier with each step. Thick with dust, every breath tasted of stone and decay. The walls were lined with faded hieroglyphs, their edges softened by time. Flickering torchlight barely cut through the darkness, shadows stretching unnaturally along the limestone corridor. The deeper we went, the colder it became. It was not the relief of shade, but something else. A damp, unnatural chill that clung to our skin despite the scorching heat outside. As I swept the flashlight around, bugs scurried away, retreating into the cracks in the walls. I found myself subconsciously scanning for snakes or scorpions. Amir's voice dropped lower. "Watch where you step," he warned. "There are things far worse than falling through rotten wood." Jake spotted it first, a narrow passage at the base of the pyramid, separate from the well-trodden paths tourists were allowed to explore. "Look, Dad, can we go in?" Before I could respond, Jake was already heading towards it. Amir's face darkened. "No, that is not for tourists." But Jake was already gone. Cursing under his breath in Arabic, Amir took off after him. We followed. Jake had disappeared around a bend, his excited footsteps echoing ahead. Amir spun toward me, his frustration barely contained. "Get control of your son." I called out for Jake to wait, to come back, but I knew my words would fall on deaf ears. The passageway sloped downward, the temperature dropping noticeably with every step. A shudder ran up my spine. Part of me wanted to turn back, but Jake was leading the charge. Emma, walking at the back of the line behind Laura, let out a sudden yelp. We heard a low groan as a section of the floor shifted beneath her feet. Before anyone could react, the crumbling brick floor gave way beneath her. Laura lunged, trying to grab her, but Emma had already slipped through the narrow gap. Dust filled the air, thick and choking, making it difficult to breathe. With a strangled cry, Laura threw herself to the ground, clawing at the loose debris, desperately trying to squeeze herself into the small opening. I had to physically pull her back. "Everyone be silent," Amir ordered, his voice tense. He tilted his head, listening. Then, "Mom, Dad." Emma's voice rang out from below. Relief crashed over us. "Are you hurt?" Laura gasped. I'm okay," Emma called back, her voice shaky but steady. Hearing the commotion, Jake came running back, his face drained of color as he took in the scene before him. Laura was covered in dust, shaking and sobbing. "That's what happens when you wander off on your own. Your sister just fell through the damn floor." Amir snapped, his frustration barely contained. A faint glow flickered beneath us, Emma's flashlight. "It doesn't look too deep," I said, forcing myself to stay calm. Before Amir or I could react, Jake was already lowering himself into the gap. "Jake, stop!" I shouted, grabbing his legs, afraid the rest of the floor would give way beneath us. But there was no stopping him. "I can see her!" Emma grabbed my hand. There was a brief struggle, a few missed grasps, then I got her. With a strained effort, I hauled Jake back up, Emma clinging to him. Both of them collapsed onto the stone floor, breathless, dust-covered, and shaken. We all sat there, trying to calm our nerves. Laura cradled Emma tightly, pressing frantic kisses to her forehead. Then I noticed it. Emma's small hands were clenched around something, a wooden box, its surface darkened with age, the edges lined with intricate carvings. "I found it down there," she mumbled, shaking it near her ear. Inside, something rattled. Laura gently pried at the rusty lock. It crumbled with barely any effort. The moment the box clicked open, everything went dark. Not just in the tunnel. My phone, Laura's watch, the flashlight Amir was holding, every single light source we had. Emma, terrified of the pitch black, let out a scream. I fumbled in the dark, my hands finding her trembling form. "Calm down. It's okay," I reassured her, trying to steady my own racing heartbeat. "Stay still. Don't move," Amir barked, his voice cutting through the chaos. I heard him fumbling, searching for something, his spare flashlight, I hoped. Then, after what felt like an eternity, a flicker, light sputtered back to life. But Laura was gone. She was nowhere to be seen. Panic surged through me. "Laura?" I called out, but there was no answer. Panic set in as I spun in every direction, scanning the floor, desperately hoping she hadn't slipped through another gap. Jake mumbled as he grabbed my arm, his face ghost white. His flashlight trembled as he pointed deeper into the tunnel, and there she was. Laura, walking, slowly, deeper into the passageway. No light, in pitch darkness, just moving forward. We called out to her, shouted, pleaded. She didn't even flinch, didn't look back, didn't stop. Amir and I exchanged a tense look. Then, with an urgent exclamation, "Yalla!" he surged forward. We moved cautiously, closing the distance between us and Laura. "Sir, you must turn back now," Amir warned, his voice taut with fear. "This is not safe." He stepped around her, positioning himself in front of her with both hands up in a halt position in an effort to stop her and turn her around. Then he froze, eyes wide with fear. He took a few steps back. A sharp, strangled cry tore from his throat. His face twisted in terror. Alarmed, and more than a little frustrated, I grabbed Laura and forced her to turn around. She stood there, rigid as a plank. The whites of her eyes gleamed in the dim light. She wasn't blinking, wasn't speaking, just staring straight ahead. The hairs on my arms stood on end, but I refused to give in to fear. I just wanted to get everyone out of this nightmare, no matter what it took. "Laura?" I shook her, harder this time. Nothing. Then Emma saw her face and screamed. "Jake, please, can you look after Emma?" I asked Jake, blocking their view. Jake pulled his sister close as she sobbed into his chest. Even he, usually fearless, looked shaken. I tried to move Laura, to pull her away, but she wouldn't budge. It was like she had rooted herself to the stone floor. Was she having a seizure? A stroke? She had no history of medical issues, but this wasn't normal. I did the only thing I could think of. I slapped her. Hard. Laura sucked in a sharp breath, her eyes clearing as she blinked in confusion. Her hand flew to her stinging cheek. I pulled her into a fierce hug. Amir didn't waste a second. He started pushing us back, his hands firm on our shoulders. "We leave. Now." His voice held no room for argument. We rushed toward the main passageway, eager to escape, but then something stopped me in my tracks. A sound. Low, guttural. It seemed to surround us, echoing through the narrow passageway, traveling and bouncing off the walls, growing louder with every passing second. A whisper, shifting through the stale air. Words I didn't understand. Was it a chant? A prayer in a foreign language? Emma whimpered, pressing her tear-streaked face into Jake's shirt. Even Jake looked spooked. Then, I saw it. Jake was clutching the blackened wooden box Emma had found. Amir's face twisted in horror as he followed my gaze, his eyes widening in disbelief and fear. He yelled in shock.
Harry Maylake, how did he away?
Shame on you. This is cursed. He snatched the box from Jake's hand and hurled it against the stone wall with a forceful crack. We go, he commanded. Now, we were nearing the main tourist path when Laura suddenly halted. Listen, she whispered. Confused, we looked around in silence. And then, we heard it. A baby's cry, thin, mournful, echoing from deep within the catacombs. Laura went still. Then, without warning, she bolted toward the sound. I barely managed to grab her. She fought me, kicking, clawing, until Amir and I had to physically drag her back toward the exit. Whatever was making those sounds seemed intent on stopping us from leaving. The moment we stepped into the burning Egyptian sun, Laura collapsed onto the sand. She clutched at the sand, her body racked with sobs. I know it's impossible, she whispered, but it sounded like Rose. It sounded like my baby. I dropped to my knees beside her, wrapping my arms around her, but there was no consolation I could offer that would ease her grief. The kids stood frozen, silent, unsure of what to do. Amir helped Laura onto her camel. He seemed deeply troubled, his brow furrowed in thought. Once the kids were settled, he turned to me, his expression grim. Tell me, he said quietly, have you lost someone recently? His gaze flickered to Laura. The sun was now high in the sky. I watched as Jake pulled a couple of sun hats from his backpack, slapping one onto Emma's head to protect her from the harsh sun before placing one on his own head. I briefly explained how, over a couple of years ago, we had lost our 2-month-old baby girl, Rose. She had a heart defect. There was nothing the doctors could do. There were no donors available at that time. In fact, the doctors had given her only days to live after birth, but she made it to 2 months. Amir nodded in understanding and then whispered, Sir, what happened inside the pyramid? I mean, if you believe in these things or not, I have just this advice for you, sir. It is known for afrits, jinn to attach itself to a grieving person. People who have lost someone are broken and weak. Afrits are bad, evil jinn. Please keep an eye on your wife. Yes, he said. Amir helped me back on my camel, and we headed back to our parked car. The trip back to the hotel was silent. I had mixed feeling from Amir's comment. I didn't believe in this mumbo-jumbo superstition, supernatural things, but I did hear a baby crying in a dark, deserted catacomb. There was no explaining that. There seemed to be a dark cloud hanging over us, like something bad was about to happen. You know this feeling you get sometimes, in the pit of your stomach. That night, I woke to the sound of whispering, the same voice from the tomb. I sat up, heart pounding, and saw Jake standing in the middle of our hotel room, facing the balcony. The glow from the streetlights outside cast his silhouette against the curtains. He stood completely still, unmoving in the dark. Was he sleepwalking? Jake, I whispered. He turned, and my blood ran cold. His eyes weren't his eyes. They were white. His lips moved, but the voice that came out wasn't his. It was ancient, foreign, wrong. I suddenly jerked awake and realized I was having a nightmare. Both Jake and Emma were fast asleep. Laura was soundly asleep next to me. I was drenched in sweat, the feeling of unease washing over me stronger than before. I couldn't shake it off, and I didn't sleep for the rest of the night, my mind racing. The next day, strange things kept happening. We had scheduled to visit the marketplace. Both Laura and Emma had a great time shopping for souvenirs, clothes, and even spices. Most of the time, I kept feeling like someone was behind me, but every time I turned around, There was no one there. Whispers drifted through the air, soft, indecipherable murmurs that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. At the restaurant, we were seated at our table when a waiter suddenly stumbled, nearly spilling a pot of scalding tea all over me. His face went pale with shock, and he glanced behind him, spluttering an apology, but he seemed terrified, his hands trembling as he tried to steady the tray. He quickly asked another waiter if he had seen who pushed him. The other simply shrugged and shook his head before walking away, leaving an unsettling silence between us. Later, as we rode the elevator back to our room, a sharp crack echoed through the space. The mirror beside us splintered from top to bottom, the jagged lines stretching like skeletal fingers. Everyone gasped. No one said a word, but I could feel it. We all could. Something was with us. There was steam on the mirror, as if someone had been breathing against it, leaving a foggy trace that seemed to linger in the air. "Mom," Emma gasped, clutching Laura's arm. She was trembling. "It's all right, Emma," Laura said gently. "Someone must have hit the mirror earlier, and the vibration from the elevator moving must have made it crack. It happens. It's okay." "No," Emma whispered, shaking her head. "I keep hearing the voice from yesterday." She hesitated before adding, "Bad things have been happening all day." Laura and I exchanged a glance, both alarmed, both confused. Once we were back in our room, I ordered ice cream. It had always been my go-to method for comforting the kids, a small, familiar indulgence to lighten the mood. But this time, it didn't work. The whole vibe in the room was wrong. No one was relaxed. No one spoke much. Everyone was on edge. In the late afternoon, we went to the pool after a quick nap. The kids quickly found the friends they had made over the past few days, their laughter and chatter a welcome distraction from the unease that had settled over us. Laura and I stretched out on the lounge chairs, the warm sun pressing down on us, but I could still feel the weight of something unseen. "Laura, talk to me," I said softly, reaching for her hand. She didn't answer. Tears ran down her cheeks. I gently pulled off her sunglasses, startled by the redness in her eyes. After I insisted again, she covered her face with her hands. In a choked whisper, she said, "I keep hearing Rosa's cry, all night, all day. It's like she's calling out to me. I dreamt about her last night." I remembered Amir's warning, his voice lingering in my mind like an echo I couldn't shake. The strange events of the day gnawed at me, feeding my unease. A part of me believed, Laura, how could I not? But the logical side of me resisted, wondering if her mind was simply playing tricks on her, warped by grief and the weight of everything that had happened. Later, I noticed a concierge carrying a stack of board games to a guest's room. It gave me an idea. At the reception, I asked about them, and they were more than happy to lend us a few. That night, we played for hours, our laughter and light-hearted chatter filling the room. For a while, it almost felt normal, as if the shadows of the past day hadn't followed us, and for a brief moment, we could forget everything else. Almost. By 10 p.m., we were all in bed. The kids were out like a light, exhausted from the day. Laura, on the other hand, barely spoke after dinner. She just stared off into the distance, lost in thought. I drifted off, but sometime later, a strange chill crept over my skin. A cool breeze, unnatural in the stillness of the room. Then, something heavy crashed onto my chest. I jolted awake, gasping, only to find Emma on top of me, slapping my chest, shaking my shoulder, her screams piercing through the darkness. "Wake up, Dad." Pain shot through me as I tried to push myself up. I gently moved Emma off me, my heart hammering. "What's going on?" I rasped, my voice thick with sleep and something else. Dread. I looked around the room. Laura's side of the bed was empty. I turned toward the bathroom. The door was open. The lights were off. She wasn't there. Jake was sitting up in bed, his face mirroring my confusion. That's when I realized Emma was still talking, her words spilling out too fast, a frantic jumble I couldn't untangle. "What man?" I interrupted, gripping her shoulders gently, trying to steady her. She hiccuped a breath, her eyes wide. "I saw Mom walking out of the room, following a man outside." The words sent a cold shiver down my spine. I struggled to make sense of it. "Emma, was it hotel staff? Was he wearing the uniform?" She shook her head. "No, it was too dark. I only saw a shadow. A dark figure walking out the door." I felt my stomach drop. My pulse pounded in my ears. Laura was gone, and I was terrified. "How long ago was this?" I asked as I hurriedly pulled on my clothes. Emma hesitated. 5 minutes? 10? I swallowed hard. 10 minutes? She nodded again. I didn't waste another second. I rushed to the reception, telling the staff that my wife had sleepwalked out of the room and asking for help to find her. There was no way I was going to say she had followed a man in black. Not yet. I wasn't even sure what was real anymore, or how much of this was just the imagination of a scared little girl. None of it made sense. I tore through the hotel property, checking the gardens, the hallways, the pool. But she was nowhere. A sickening realization settled in. Laura might have left the property. One of the hotel staff, a young man named Javed, offered to drive me around to look for her. She couldn't have gone far on foot, he assured me. And he was right. We found her barefoot on the street, walking aimlessly, her nightgown billowing slightly in the warm night air. I jumped out of the car before it had even fully stopped. Grabbing Laura's arm, I spun her around to face me. Her eyes, completely white, just like inside the pyramid. A cold dread twisted in my gut. I shook her, harder than I meant to, until she blinked once, twice, and her irises slowly returned. Her confused gaze flickered between me and the deserted street. "How did I get here?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "What's happening?" I pulled her into a tight hug, relief crashing over me. She was safe. We made our way back to the hotel, the warm glow of the lobby lights doing little to chase away the unease curling around me. As I led Laura toward our room, Javed, the hotel staff member who had helped us, fell into step beside me. He hesitated before speaking, his voice low and careful. "Sir, I noticed your wife's eyes," he said awkwardly. I stopped walking. I told the security guard escorting us to please take my wife back to the room before turning back to Javed. "What about them?" Javed glanced around before looking down at his feet. "I don't think this was simple sleepwalking. I think she is being haunted by a jinn, sir." My stomach clenched. I had already heard Amir's warnings, but at the time, I brushed them off. Now, I wasn't so sure. Emma had seen something in our room. A dark shape. A shadow. And Laura, her eyes. I didn't know what to believe anymore, but there was no logical explanation for what was happening to us. "Have you bought or found anything that was unusual or strange, sir? Maybe you hear sounds, voices, or see something that is not normal?" Javed asked in his broken English, his eyes searching mine. I hesitated. Then, against my better judgment, I told him about the box, the small, ornate wooden box we found inside the pyramid. I gave him a quick rundown of everything that had happened since. The cracked mirror, the near accidents, the whispers, Laura hearing the baby cries that sounded like our little Rose. Javed listened in complete silence. When I finished, he nodded, looking down at his feet, deep in thought. Finally, he exhaled. "Sir, I believe your wife has released a jinn. I think the jinn might have attached itself to her." I stared at him. What does that even mean? My mind raced. Was this real? Or was this some elaborate setup? I could already predict what was coming next. He would offer to help, to perform some kind of ritual, for a price, of course. and I was right. Sir, my uncle is a spiritual healer. He can perform the ritual. The sooner you do this, the better it will be for your wife, Javed said, his voice firm but respectful. I nodded, but my mind was spinning. Was this real or just a scam? Let me think about it, I said, thanking him before heading back to the room. Laura was in bed, arms wrapped protectively around Emma, while Jake sat on his bed, watching me, waiting for answers. I sat down on the edge of the bed, looking at Emma. Tell me exactly what happened. She hesitated, her eyes darting to Laura before finally speaking. I've been hearing whispers, moaning strange sounds, since yesterday. I woke up and heard someone get out of bed. Over Jake's shoulder, I saw Mom walking toward the bathroom, but instead of going inside, she turned and headed for the door. She swallowed hard. I was about to call out to her when I saw someone else standing in front of her. I couldn't see much, just a dark shape. Then, they disappeared around the corner and the door opened and closed. The room felt heavier with each word she spoke. I thought Mom would come back, but when she didn't, I came to wake you up. Silence. No one spoke. No one moved. I exhaled, rubbing my temple. We should leave. We should go home. Everyone nodded. No hesitation. Nobody wanted to stay any longer. When we first got back to New York, everything seemed normal. For a few days, I let myself believe it was over. Then Laura started losing time again. At first, it was little things, forgetting conversations, misplacing items. Then the sleepwalking returned. And the crying. We all heard it, the soft, distant wails of a baby. But for Laura, it was unbearable. The sound sent her into an inconsolable state, as if she were trapped somewhere we couldn't reach. It felt like something had come back with us. I started researching the Ifrit that Amir and Javed had warned me about. It wasn't just folklore. A spiritual healer in New York had written extensively about jinn, about possessions, hauntings, the dangers of disturbing what should be left alone. A month later, I arranged for him to perform a ritual. It helped, mostly. We didn't hear the baby crying anymore. Laura no longer woke up in strange places, but the unease hadn't left us. Laura hated being at home alone now. She went back to work just to avoid the silence of the house. And me? Some nights, when the house was still, I felt it. A presence. Watching, waiting. A few years later, Laura was struck by a cyclist. Her head hit the pavement hard. She never woke up. Months passed, her body lingering in a coma while I clung to hope. But in the end, the doctors confirmed what I refused to accept. There was no brain activity. They advised me to let her go. Now, Jake and Emma are all grown up, beginning their own lives. Last week, I dropped Emma off at her new place, ready to start university. She was excited, full of plans for the future. A fresh start, a new chapter. It seemed the kids have forgotten about the incidents. I have decided to put the house up for sale. I am rolling the dice on this. The presence had never truly left us. It lingered, watching, waiting. Laura had been the most vulnerable. She was the one who had opened the cursed box, but I had only made things worse by trying to banish it. We tried everything. Rituals, blessings, exorcisms. Each time, it seemed to weaken, but it never disappeared. It always came back, angrier. Some believed that after Laura was gone, it had bound itself to the house instead. I can only hope they were right. As I drove away from the cemetery, I caught a glimpse in the rearview mirror, a dark shadow standing motionless beneath the weeping willow, right where my car had been parked.